Coming off of January, game industry news is flowing as massive company acquisitions fade into the background. Nintendo and Sony have released their first digital presentations of the year, and the second half of February will be full of gaming news for everything from Dragon Ball to Digimon. Giant titles are also rolling out, with Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, Dying Light 2 and Elden Ring. Despite industry-wide setbacks caused by the pandemic, 2022 is set to be a monumental year for gaming, and it seems Capcom could follow suit. Capcom's roadmap currently consists only of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's summer release. The company is normally very busy supporting several franchises at once, so this silence is deafening. However, something big is coming at the beginning of next week. Capcom has established a Capcom Countdown website with a timer that seems to end around 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time going into February 21st. This website is full of possibilities, and fans are already coming up with a list of theories and hopes. Of all the announcements this countdown could lead to, the biggest would undoubtedly be Resident Evil 4 Remake. The number of rumors and leaks concerning the game is enormous, and recently more information came out. At this point, it's likely not a matter of if Resident Evil 4 will be remade, but when. The font used for the countdown bears some resemblance to Resident Evil's traditional title text, and the countdown website has a dark yet vaguely technological vibe. Now is as good a time as ever to reveal the much-anticipated remake, and Capcom is primed for a strong year if it does. Resident Evil 4 Remake is not the only Resident Evil project in development right now. The asymmetric multiplayer Resident Evil RE-verse is still seemingly in the works. Resident Evil Village DLC is also outstanding, with no indication of what it will be and when it will release. Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 7 both had excellent DLC offerings, so I am excited to see what comes about for Resident Evil Village. Capcom apparently did not have firm plans to give the game DLC before launch, so development started later than it would have for past games. The full brunt of Resident Evil Village's post-launch plans could be revealed at the end of this countdown, but that seems like a lot of pomp and circumstance for some bonus content. Also on the horizon is Pragmata, a game which is still a while off, but has yet to receive a proper reveal. Yet as it has already been revealed, a countdown seems like too much for this alone. Rumored projects for Capcom's future include exciting titles like Dragon's Dogma 2 and Mega Man X9, and who knows what else the company could be cooking up. Perhaps the most likely contender here is Street Fighter 6. It was 8 years between the release of Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5, which launched in 2008 and 2016, respectively. Even then, many Street Fighter fans said Street Fighter 5 arrived too early, and that Street Fighter 4 deserved more focus. Street Fighter 5 would have never happened if PlayStation didn't fund the game. Now, in the midst of a pandemic that stunted the Street Fighter 5 competitive scene, Capcom seems poised to move forward. How fans will react is a mystery, given past controversies. But the Street Fighter 6 announcement may be arriving sooner than many expect. A strange countdown was published on Monday by Capcom on its official website. The Capcom countdown is currently shown to have 5 days and 8 hours remaining before it reaches 0. That's on February 20th at what's believed to be 10 p.m. Pacific Time. There are no notable messages, images, or anything else of reference on the website outside the countdown itself. It's a big mystery. However, there are several persuasive arguments outside the countdown itself that the announcement will be Street Fighter 6. The first bit of evidence is that February 20th coincides with a major Street Fighter-related event. The season final of the Capcom Pro Tour for Street Fighter V Championship Edition runs from February 17th through February 20th. That means that the countdown will likely end as the season final is playing out. Capcom is known to make fighting game-related announcements during big tournaments, and this is just such a situation. Second, a notable Capcom-adjacent Twitter account retweeted the announcement of the countdown from Capcom. The Capcom CapJams account, the team responsible for recent Street Fighter game music, shared the post along with a couple of pairs of emoji eyes. This could very well just be Capcom brands trying to build up excitement for the reveal, but the countdown wasn't retweeted by the Resident Evil or Monster Hunter accounts, at the very least. Lastly, Street Fighter VI was a name included in the massive hack that Capcom suffered in late 2020. The leak showed that Capcom planned to release Street Fighter VI in 2022. Plans can change though, and the leak isn't wholly reliable, but that timeline matches up with a possible announcement coming up. That the countdown is potentially for Street Fighter VI is entirely a rumor, of course. There's no clear indication that the announcement is for Street Fighter VI, or that it's even Street Fighter related. It does seem the most likely possibility for what Capcom would be ready to reveal as of February 2022, however. Speaking of Capcom, Capcom launches an online Resident Evil museum on the franchise's official online portal, featuring developer insight and never-before-seen art. The Resident Evil franchise celebrated its 25th anniversary last year, and it appears that fans will be treated to more nostalgic looks back at the series' history well into 2022. This may not be a surprise, as Resident Evil is one of the biggest franchises under Capcom, and has spread into a variety of mediums. Now, Capcom has launched an online Resident Evil museum dedicated to providing insights into the series' history. Over the last 2 decades, Resident Evil has produced a treasure trove of mainline and spin-off titles, as well as some titles that could count as either. This means that the Resident Evil Museum has a lot of games to give players insights into. The verified Twitter account attached to Capcom's main Resident Evil Online portal recently announced that this virtual museum was now available for fans. The museum currently includes exhibits on Resident Evil 1 to 3 and 0, featuring insights into their production as well as never-before-seen artwork. This new artwork includes character models and concept art, but gamers will need to log in with a Capcom ID in order to view it. The Twitter post linking to the virtual museum features one of the most memorable scenes from the first Resident Evil game as a teaser. The scene in question is a close-up on the face of one zombie in particular, as it slowly looks over its shoulder toward the player. Although the concept art shown in the tweet has some notable differences from the final cut scene, it's still easily recognizable as the same zombie. In the game, this scene helped set the stage for the eerie mood within Spencer Mansion. It plays when the player encounters their very first zombie within the building, and went down in survival horror history. Presumably, the online Resident Evil Museum will be expanded to feature exhibits on some of the franchise's other 24 games in the future. It may also incorporate elements of the franchise's multimedia entries, such as the recent movie Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, the classic films, and the upcoming live-action Netflix series. The website already features a teaser suggesting that more content will be added on February 22nd. The 4 games currently featured are classified under the header of Umbrella the Tragedy, possibly because they all take place in roughly the same location during a short period of time. Future Resident Evil games may be listed under different headers, whether or not Umbrella is involved in their plots. It's really good to see Capcom respecting the Resident Evil universe. It is one of my greatest of all time, and it's great to see the universe still stand strong after 25 years. It's been over a year since the release of CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077, a game initially hyped up to be one of the biggest open-world RPGs of all time that was ultimately met with major controversy upon its release, with the console versions famously lambasted for technical issues and under-delivering on expectations set by the publisher. Despite this, CD Projekt Red has committed to improving the game's performance on consoles. Cyberpunk 2077 was first announced in 2012, where it was revealed to be a video game adaptation of Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk 2020 board game from the Witcher video game developer CD Projekt Red. While the game was met with a lot of buzz at its announcement, major hype for its release did not come until the huge success of CD Projekt's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt in 2015, which has often been credited with being one of the greatest RPGs of all time. This, along with a huge marketing campaign, put major expectations on Cyberpunk 2077, which led to many delays up until the end of 2020, when the game released in an infamously unpolished state to the point that Sony pulled it from the PlayStation Store shortly after its release. A next-generation PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S release of Cyberpunk 2077 was promised by CD Projekt Red before the initial release of the game, with the developer taking extra time to ensure that the game would take advantage of the unique hardware capabilities of the consoles. On Tuesday morning, CD Projekt Red officially revealed the next-gen versions of Cyberpunk 2077 for both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Both next-gen ports released alongside Cyberpunk 2077's highly anticipated 1.5 patch. 2 videos have been shared for Cyberpunk 2077's next-gen upgrade. Both videos cover the same sequence of gameplay, though the PS5 and Xbox Series X videos don't perfectly align, if only to show they are independent playthroughs, and not just a recreation of gameplay on both consoles. The gameplay featured in the trailers is extensive, offering over 30 minutes of Cyberpunk 2077 footage. It should be noted that the footage is story-focused, rather than sandbox-focused, which may raise some eyebrows. For the most part, the Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay on PS5 and Xbox Series X will prove familiar to past Cyberpunk 2077 players, just with more impressive visuals than on PS4 and Xbox One. Features that CD Projekt Red calls attention to include 4K resolution with dynamic scaling and ray tracing, though it also mentions a variety of other non-specific visual improvements. The Xbox Series S is just only 1440p 30 FPS, with no ray tracing. The split RAM in the Xbox consoles are really limiting the potential of these games, and also affect the multi-platform titles that are coming to PS5 also. So, when third-party devs go full next-gen, I hope major third-party devs don't make games for that Series S, that one is gonna hold back gaming for this entire gen. While it may not be apparent from the gameplay featured in these 2 trailers, Cyberpunk 2077's 1.5 patch will feature massive changes to the overall experience. Those changes are largely focused on the sandbox, however. Cyberpunk 2077's completely reworking combat balance, updating enemy AI, adding complexity to combat scenarios, rebuilding NPC vehicle traffic technology, and fixing the broken crowd AI. As Cyberpunk 2077's player base understands, the list of necessary fixes and changes is long. CD Projekt Red is going to address as many of them in Update 1.5 as it can. The question that's left lingering in Cyberpunk 2077 players' minds is whether CD Projekt Red will have done enough in patch 1.5 to make it worth upgrading or buying the game anew for next-generation consoles. Obviously, the visual improvements alone will be persuasive for many Cyberpunk 2077 fans. But others may feel like they've gotten enough out of their first playthrough, or that they wanted larger changes than what CD Projekt Red managed. The majority of Cyberpunk 2077's patch 1.5 is dedicated to fixes that make the game's UI, mechanics, and other features function like they should have at launch. So much so that it could take players weeks to see each in action. Fixed mission progression and the removal of T-posing NPCs and clipping are just the tip of a substantial list. Combat is arguably the department that's been renovated the most, though. Issues that prevented enemy AI from aiding their comrades in battle, even if they'd witnessed them die, have been stamped out. These fixes, in addition to more general combat balancing, have had the knock-on effect of making the game play more like it was originally envisioned. Due to the long list of issues that plagued Cyberpunk 2077 when it first launched, some of the fixes that have been implemented could be perceived as new content. Back in 2020, the game's enemy AI and pedestrian NPCs were criticized by fans for not being particularly intelligent. Cyberpunk 2077's 1.5 patch tackles both of these groups in ways that fundamentally alter the content of the game. In general, the enemies that V runs into are now more nuanced and capable fighters. Beyond taking cover and implementing tactics, hostile factions will behave uniquely from one another. In terms of Night City's other NPCs, they too will act more appropriately when faced with danger, and can even engage the player in combat when provoked. Thanks to an extensively redesigned driving model, players might find themselves bumping into NPC pedestrians less frequently following Cyberpunk 2077's newest patch. Beyond remodeling the clutch, gearbox, and engine characteristics of every vehicle in the game, a new ABS braking system has been implemented to consistently improve drivability, handling, and stability across the board. Headlining the game's new driving model is the all-new Burnout mode, which adds more simulation-style mechanics to the experience. Players can now subsequently heat up their tires in order to enact a drag race-style launch, whilst also initiating easier-to-control brake stands, donuts, and drifts. When it comes fixes, it should be noted that CD Projekt Red has gone beyond just fixing what was already in place. The studio has also taken Cyberpunk 2077's relaunch as an opportunity to balance and expand other parts of the experience. Aspects like the game's cyberware mechanics have been tweaked in an attempt to make them more enjoyable. Cooldowns are now properly displayed by the blood pump cyberware, for example, while activating Berserk doubles V's stamina instead of extending it infinitely. The character's evasion stat has also been jettisoned from the experience in order to achieve similar results, with mitigation chance and mitigation strength being introduced in its place. Cyberpunk 2077's perk system is another area that has been tinkered with heavily, as many individual perks having been moved within the skill tree for starters. 6 perks like Blood's Well and Epimorphosis have even been redesigned to make them more relevant. In order to keep the experience fulfilling, 5 brand new perks have also been thrown to the mix, often at the expense of less useful ones. The Commando perk, for example, which allowed the player to be undetectable underwater, has been replaced by Looking Sharp, which blinds enemies that V has hit in the head with the game's updated throwing knives. The economy of Cyberpunk 2077's Night City sandbox hasn't been exempt from the balancing treatment either. In addition to earning more loot and rewards from the game's extensive list of missions and side quests, players will now experience decreased prices from the city's vendors. It should be noted that CD Projekt Red's balancing attempts have been rounded out by the fact that the game's easy mode is now slightly more challenging. Considering how much time has passed since Cyberpunk 2077 launched, some fans likely assumed that the game's return would be accompanied by new DLC content. While the colossal effort that was needed to make the game more playable has prevented CD Projekt Red from creating a true expansion, Patch 1.5 does add some smaller-scale features to the mix. None of these are story-based like long-term fans of the game are probably craving, though. The closest the studio gets to implementing this sort of content is through new interactions and messages with Cyberpunk 2077's romanceable characters and the option to sleep at their apartments. For new apartments are also rentable by V through a one-time fee on the Easy Estates website. These range from a cheap option found within the map's Northside region all the way to a more affluent Corpo Plaza-based apartment. All the new property additions can be decorated in unique ways, as can the game's older pre-existing ones. What's more, CD Projekt Red has made each of the game's properties more useful from a more general gameplay perspective as well. Completing actions like showering or resting in an apartment's bed will now lead to V's stats being temporarily buffed. Resting in a bed, for example, will give the protagonist the refreshed status condition that activates a plus 20% XP boost. How players express themselves during Cyberpunk 2077's gritty narrative has been expanded too. Beyond new photo mode options and the ability to customize V's appearance via mirrors found in the game's apartments, CD Projekt Red has added 2 brand new weapon options. At Wilson's Second Amendment store, players will now be able to buy the Dara Polytechnic Umbra, a power assault rifle, and the Budget Arms Guillotine submachine gun. If these powerful new weapons weren't enough, several attachments have been added into the mix in an effort to improve Cyberpunk 2077's established arsenal. 4 new weapon scopes are subsequently available, alongside 10 new muzzle brakes for handguns, assault rifles, and submachine guns. These additions, alongside some much-needed UI quality of life changes, should make gunplay more enjoyable. Even though it's fair to say that CD Projekt Red has had a strained relationship with Sony in recent years, thanks to Cyberpunk 2077's temporary removal from the PlayStation Store, the PS5 port of the game still features elements that fans have come to expect from titles on the platform. Full DualSense support tops the billing in terms of new features, with the controller's haptic triggers being a factor in the experience alongside support for its built-in speaker. 3D audio is now available via compatible headsets and speakers within the PS5 version of the game for the first time as well. On top of all, DualSense support was also added in romance scenes, so you know the vibes. Time will tell whether CD Projekt Red is able to recapture the attention of its fanbase. Despite all the controversies surrounding Cyberpunk 2077's launch, including being pulled from the PlayStation Store for several months, it was still a striking success on other platforms and very well received by critics too. The potential for Cyberpunk 2077 on PS5 to be one of the best games of 2022 is there. It's time to see if CD Projekt Red has capitalized on it. PS5 has full DualSense support and also 3D audio, making it the definitive edition. Since the release of patch 1.5 for Cyberpunk 2077, the PS4 file size decreased from nearly 100 GB down to 59 GB. This may seem quite odd, all things considered. As advancements in gaming hardware and software continue to roll in, this has caused game file sizes to become much larger. Some of the most popular and technically impressive PS4 games tend to have enormous file sizes, so to see the file size of Cyberpunk 2077 decrease, instead of increase as a result of this newest patch, is certainly bizarre. However, there are a number of things this could possibly mean. In the past, a number of the content updates and hotfixes for Cyberpunk 2077 applied to specific instances in-game where a crash would consistently occur during the middle of certain quests. A number of these Cyberpunk 2077 crashes ended up not being fixed on PS4, resulting in the file size getting larger and larger to accommodate all the new patches. Thus, this newest patch could mean that a number of these minor fixes were addressed more efficiently, resulting in a more compact game file size. As far as the PS5 is concerned, the Kraken ain't lacking. Speaking of Cyberpunk 2077, Cyberpunk 2077's rumored feature of a fully functioning metro system will not be coming to Night City in any future updates. After Cyberpunk 2077 received its latest substantial update, hundreds of gamers are paying another visit back to Night City to dabble in chaos and flex their cyber augmentations. With that said, some of the more laid-back adventurers are simply cruising around to see what the vast dystopian world has to offer. After all, developer CD Projekt Red made this section all the better since said substantial update overhauled how vehicles handle and perform in the game by finer tuning the driving experience. With this being the case, players are wondering if CD Projekt Red will add other traveling features, such as a metro train system, and incorporate these components into Cyberpunk 2077 as a part of a similar future update. However, in a response to Twitter user CP2077 community regarding an in-game screenshot of an under-construction metro sign, CD Projekt Red's global community director Marcin Moment wanted to clear the air about the possibility of ever seeing an actual functioning metro in the game. Marcin Moment, who does admit that he is aware that the following news will be somewhat of a buzzkill to the current wave of Cyberpunk 2077 hype, evaluates by reaffirming that there are no plans to add metro to the game. While this may be a bummer, many users responded with mastery and empathy to how Moment is just saying it like it is and not sugarcoating player expectations with teases or vague retorts. This notion was further reinforced when Moment followed up the news with a response that reads that this might not be the best news, but we want to be transparent and just say it like it is. Many players are willing to give Cyberpunk 2077 a second chance since Update 1.5 proved to be a considerable step in the right direction for all parties involved, even if certain features aren't being added to the game. I hope they keep their word and add quality content to the game moving forward, and also I am looking forward to that Witcher 3 next-gen update with new DLC expansion. Moving forward, Nintendo has just announced that both the 3DS and Wii U eShop will be discontinued as of March 2023. But what does this mean for players? Though it's long past their heyday, the Nintendo 3DS and Nintendo Wii U are still played and enjoyed by many today. Each with a library of exclusive games, the 3DS and Wii U aren't quite obsolete just yet, but Nintendo seems to think otherwise. In a recent Twitter announcement, Nintendo of America has stated that the Nintendo Wii U and 3DS eShop will be shutting down in just over a year's time. While 3DS and Wii U owners got a hint of the impending closure almost a year ago, when Nintendo's Japanese Twitter announced that funds could no longer be added via credit card to these stores, this official and pretty final statement is sure to disappoint at least a few Nintendo 3DS and Wii U owners. Here's exactly what Nintendo's 3DS and Wii U eShop plans are. According to Nintendo's official statement, the 3DS and Wii U eShop will no longer allow users to purchase content as of late March 2023. This will apply to all models of the 3DS, 2DS, and Wii U, and covers any type of downloadable content that the user has not already purchased. Free content, such as the plethora of free demos on the eShop, will also be removed for those who haven't already downloaded them. While 3DS and Wii U owners will obviously still be able to purchase physical copies of games, players have just over a year to purchase all the eShop's download-only games thereafter. Great titles like Axiom Verge, Severed, and Shantae, and The Pirate's Curse will all become unavailable to purchase on Wii U come March 2023, while the 3DS will say goodbye to the likes of Ace Attorney Trilogy, Box Boy, and SteamWorld Dig. Although Nintendo is keeping the 3DS and Wii U eShops open for business until March 2023, users will no longer be able to add funds to their account via credit card from May 23, 2022, just a few months away. As of August 29, 2022, users will also no longer be able to add funds to their account via an eShop card, so if players have some old gift cards lying around, now's the time to use them. For those Wii U and 3DS owners that also have a Switch, then they can technically link their Nintendo Network ID wallets to their Nintendo account wallet, which allows them to add funds via the Switch's eShop, and then purchase downloadable content on the 3DS and Wii U. If a user does this, then they'll be able to buy new 3DS and Wii U games up until March 2023, long after the store stops accepting credit cards and eShop cards. Nintendo has also stated that download codes for full games and DLC will still be redeemable up until that March 2023 date. Nintendo has made it clear that any downloadable content that has already been purchased on the 3DS and Wii U eShop will be available to the player after that March 2023 cutoff point. For the foreseeable future, players will be able to re-download 3DS and Wii U games and DLC that they already own. Nintendo has also confirmed that Wii U and 3DS online play will still work on the systems after March 2023, meaning that players can still enjoy online multiplayer in games like Splatoon and Mario Kart 8. For those feeling a little nostalgic, Nintendo also released a My Memories website alongside this news. This website will show a player's history on the 3DS and Wii U console, showcasing some neat play statistics. The Wii U and Nintendo 3DS versions of the Nintendo eShop will be shutting down in March of 2023, and it appears that Pokemon Bank will be following suit. However, players will first be able to take full advantage of the app for free. Pokemon Bank usually costs a $4.99 annual fee to use. Pokemon Bank was invaluable to longtime series fans who wanted to transfer Pokemon from earlier titles to more recent ones. Combined with the similar service Pokemon Home, gamers are able to transfer Pokemon from the Nintendo 3DS titles to Switch titles such as Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now that the Nintendo eShop is closing down, the days of this partnership are numbered. However, Nintendo claims that the app should continue to function for a while even after the eShop shuts down. As long as gamers downloaded it onto a Nintendo 3DS, they should be able to access its features for free once the eShop is closed. Reportedly, no actual purchase will be necessary to use Pokemon Bank after the Nintendo 3DS version of the eShop is closed. Interested gamers can just download the application now and leave it dormant until after the shop closes. It's currently unclear how long the Pokemon Bank free service will be available for, but a Japanese language tweet appears to state that the app will be available free for a fixed period of time. In other words, gamers who want to take advantage of this deal should move their Pokemon as quickly as possible. The decision is estimated to remove nearly 2,000 games from availability. Nintendo says it could bring some games back as part of its Nintendo Switch Online subscription service, but I believe or expect Nintendo to follow through in a meaningful way. But Nintendo's online service sucks and there should be an option for native play and buying the games on the Switch store. One video game archival foundation has even gone so far as saying Nintendo's behavior is actively destructive to video game history. The quotation comes from the non-profit archival organization Video Game History Foundation, and what it's describing is more complex than Nintendo simply shutting down the Wii U and 3DS storefronts. While, obviously, that's a major part of the issue, the bigger problem goes beyond that. As Video Game History Foundation describes, Nintendo also actively funds lobbying that prevents even libraries from being able to provide legal access to these games, due to its support of the controversial Entertainment Software Association. Video Game History Foundation understands, even if it doesn't support, the business realities associated with taking down the 3DS and Wii U digital storefronts. But it doesn't understand what Nintendo expects its fanbase to do. Denying commercial access is one thing, but only if it comes hand in hand with support of institutional archival preservation. Nintendo's joint removal of games from availability and continued efforts against archival are what's being described as actively destructive. To provide some perspective on the situation, Nintendo's closure of the Wii U and 3DS eShops will make nearly 2,000 games unavailable. That includes 450 digital-only Wii U games, 600 digital-only 3DS games, and around 530 virtual console games outside those already available on Nintendo Switch Online. It's an astonishing number of game releases that Nintendo simply has no plan for or willingness to make available potentially ever again. As for what the Video Game History Foundation would like Nintendo to do, it asks for it to rethink its position on archival and to work with the ESA to find a solution. Whether this means making classic games available through library systems or otherwise, all the VGHF wants is for these games not to be lost in time. It isn't just that thousands of games could disappear overnight, but that Nintendo's only plan for them is to make a scant few available via a subscription service. Though the pervasive opinion online is for Nintendo to leave the Wii U and 3DS storefronts up perpetually. Given Nintendo's history, neither the Video Game History Foundation nor Nintendo fans are likely to get what they'd like. I have not seen any Nintendo fans or the quote-unquote Nutras who were raged about the PS3 and PS Vita stores closure news, and collectively we all made Sony to reverse the decision. But when it comes to Nintendo, these dudes never say a word, and whatever Nintendo does, its fans never hold them accountable nor criticize it. From demanding better hardware and good-looking games to improving their online service and introducing voice chat and trophies, Nintendo fans never ask or demand better from Nintendo. I want Nintendo to make a powerful console, and at least make games that looks as good as late PS3 era games from third party. Nintendo doesn't even do that, and the latest Pokemon, Mario and Zelda games are looking horrible and running horrible on the Switch. Nintendo fans need to hold them accountable and demand better, otherwise these shittier practices will be happening more and more. As far as this storefront closure, I don't think Nintendo will give a fuck. Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard is one of the biggest video game news story of the last decade. Activision Blizzard is one of the largest third-party publishers in the industry, so fans were naturally concerned about the future of these games on competing platforms. There was a lot of speculation around whether franchises like Call of Duty and Overwatch will only be available on Xbox and PC after some time. After all, Starfield is scheduled to be an Xbox console exclusive. Activision had earlier confirmed that at least 3 Call of Duty games will be released on PlayStation consoles, but there was no guarantee that future games will not be exclusive. Now, Microsoft has released a new statement that will perhaps ease these rumblings, but there is a caveat. Let's look at that. In a blog post, Brad Smith, president and vice chairman of Microsoft, confirms that Call of Duty and other popular Activision Blizzard titles will be available on PlayStation devices beyond the current agreements. Smith acknowledges the concerns of the PlayStation user base and promises that Sony fans will be able to play the games they love. Similarly, Smith mentions that Microsoft intends to support Nintendo's successful platforms. Finally, the post states that Microsoft believes that this is the right thing to do for gamers and the industry. This post was perhaps aimed at quelling all fears for the foreseeable future, and fans now have a clear-cut answer that addresses their concerns, or it could be made to convince the FTC to avoid getting the Activision Blizzard acquisition cancelled. Microsoft was perhaps influenced by Sony's clear explanation of the future of Bungie. Sony acquired Bungie and the Destiny IP for $3.6 billion USD, but Bungie will maintain creative control and the ability to release games on any platform. Sony had clearly stated that all current and future games in development at Bungie will remain multi-platform. Aside from Call of Duty, Activision Blizzard owns a lot of popular multi-platform franchises. This doesn't mean all games will go to all platforms from now on. Xbox could make Activision Blizzard titles exclusive to the systems where Game Pass exists, similar to Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6 from Bethesda. And they can give Xbox players advantage by giving them exclusive content such as maps, skins, perks and some other discounts on Call of Duty, Overwatch, etc. Also, the marketing and esports rights for these titles will be owned by Xbox, which gives it an edge over PlayStation. Microsoft is also known for its contradictory statements, so we have to wait and see if they stay true to these words after the acquisition is completed. The Halo soundtrack is one of the most recognizable in all of video games, especially its iconic main theme. Beginning with an operatic choir-like chant, the Halo theme has featured in every numbered mainline Halo game, and has been remixed and covered by everything from marching bands to echoing stairwells. The first Halo game, Halo Combat Evolved, was developed by Bungie and released as a launch title for the original Xbox in 2001. Its popularity cemented the title not only as an iconic game, but as Xbox's flagship series. Halo as a franchise is so synonymous with Xbox that Microsoft even named its virtual assistant Cortana in a nod to the AI companion from the games. Equally synonymous with Halo is its soundtrack, which the original composers of are now suing Microsoft over, claiming they are owed for royalty payments dating back the game's full 20 years. Composers Marty O'Donnell and Mike Salvatore filed the lawsuit in June 2020 with no agreements yet to be made. If there are no agreements made in the next week, there is chance this case could go to court. The soundtrack might now be forever linked with Halo's release on the original Xbox, but this was not the first time the iconic music was heard. Originally, Halo was a game being developed by Bungie for the Apple Mac computer, and was first revealed in a very early state at the 1999 Macworld event. A concept trailer was played at the show, and heard playing in the background is the iconic Halo theme. Bungie, which was recently acquired by Sony, was first bought in 2000 by Microsoft. The Apple project was scrapped, and Halo was reworked into the Xbox franchise it is today. O'Donnell and Salvatore claimed that the work done for Bungie in 1999 was a licensed agreement so that the composers would have the right to claim the royalties on their music if it was used in future projects. Microsoft disputes this claim, saying the music qualified as work for hire, and since Microsoft had purchased Bungie, it bought with it the authorship of the soundtrack. The Halo soundtrack has been used in many projects over the past 20 years, not only in Halo video games, but promotional material and spin-offs. The trailer for the upcoming Halo TV show on Paramount Plus even uses a sting from the game's soundtrack, hinting that some iconic tracks it might appear fully in certain episodes. It is unlikely then that Microsoft will want to entertain the idea of back paying all the royalties for these uses and any continued use of the music it has used so freely up until now. But after almost a year of litigation with no agreements reached, it could be planning to fight the lawsuit rather than buying the license, perceived or otherwise, outright. Speaking of Xbox and Microsoft, cancelled action game Scalebound may get a new lease on life as Platinum Games' Hideki Kamiya expresses a desire to work on it again with Microsoft. The cancellation of Scalebound remains a sore spot in Platinum Games' history. Announced back in 2014 as an Xbox exclusive, it was to be an action RPG where players would team up with a dragon companion. Platinum Games' reputation for tightly designed and over-the-top action meant there was a lot of excitement behind this one, but development troubles ultimately led to Microsoft canceling the project in 2017. That was presumably it, but Scalebound director Hideki Kamiya has always wanted to revisit the game, and he sounds more eager than ever to give it another shot. In a recent interview with IGN Japan, Kamiya and Platinum Games president Atsushi Inaba were asked about potentially revisiting Scalebound. Inaba said that they would like to have a proper discussion with Microsoft about the possibility of reviving Scalebound, to which Kamiya added that so much work was done on it before it was cancelled, and that there's no point leaving it as is. He even directly addresses Xbox boss Phil Spencer, saying, "Phil, let's do it together." It remains to be seen if Spencer and Microsoft is as eager to take another crack at Scalebound as Platinum Games is. In case anyone is wondering why Platinum Games doesn't simply make Scalebound itself, especially since the company has grown over the last several years, it's because the IP belongs to Microsoft. So, any Scalebound revival will need Microsoft's seal of approval first. While there are no doubt many fans who would love to see Scalebound actually release, Platinum Games is plenty busy with other projects at the moment. Aside from next month's Babylon's Fall, its highest-profile title is easily the long-awaited Bayonetta 3. Many feared that the lack of updates since its 2017 announcement meant that it had suffered the same fate as Scalebound, but it's since been confirmed for a 2022 release. There's also arcade shooter Soul Cresta and Kamiya's own project GG, a superhero game that will act as a spiritual successor to Beautiful Joe and the Wonderful 101. On top of that, Inaba recently stated that he has some big aspirations for the company's future games, saying that they will be quite different to previous Platinum Games titles. He specifically mentioned wanting to create games that players could enjoy for longer periods of time, with many taking this to mean that Platinum Games is looking to break into the live service market. It's already got some experience in that department with Babylon's Fall, which will have a heavy multiplayer focus and live service elements. Since its creation in 2007, Platinum Games has developed a reputation for being something of a cult favorite studio amongst fans. While some of its releases like Nier Automata and Bayonetta might lack high-profile sales figures, especially in comparison to their genre contemporaries, their critical and public reception more than makes up for this. Often Platinum Games titles are beloved for their unique over-the-top style and subsequent quirky charms. It's for this reason that fans still lament what Scalebound could have been, 5 years after the project was unceremoniously cancelled. Promises of visceral action blended with Platinum Games' unique world-building prowess, not to mention an enticing narrative revolving around dragons, were all left unfulfilled due to admitted failures from the studio and its publishing partner Microsoft. Like most games that are cancelled, the idea of what Scalebound could have been has lingered among fans and those that were involved in the project. Just this month alone, Platinum Games director Hideki Kamiya expressed a desire for the studio and Microsoft to try again with Scalebound. It's for this reason that now seems like the perfect time to take a look back on the project's complicated development history. Even though Scalebound was officially unveiled by Microsoft at E3 2014, in an attempt to kickstart the Xbox One following its lukewarm launch, Platinum Games' desire to make the game can actually be traced all the way back to the studio's creation in 2007. While the concept of what Scalebound could be was drawn up at the time, the higher-ups in the studio ultimately decided to put Bayonetta into active development instead. It's partly for this reason why discussions regarding Scalebound have never really gone away, as the game is embedded into the identity and origins of Platinum in many respects. Following the eventual launch of cult classics like Vanquish, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and The Wonderful 101 The Wonder Shinji Mikami, Scalebound was put into active and full development in 2013. Around this time, a deal was struck between Platinum Games and Microsoft, which would see the latter assume ownership of the Scalebound IP in exchange for funding and support. In the aftermath of this agreement, what the game was intended to be on the Xbox One was fleshed out by Kamiya and his team. Concepts revolving around dinosaurs and motion controls, which were both holdovers from the Wii era, were scrapped. Instead, the latest incarnation of Scalebound was set to be a primarily third-person action RPG, where players could direct and occasionally take control of a dragon companion. Mechanically, there would have been a diverse array of systems to support this concept, such as the ability to shapeshift, execute melee combos, and the option to customize the dragon's movesets and appearance. This sense of ambition could also be seen within Scalebound's narrative direction as well. Set within the high fantasy land of Draconis, players would have been thrust into the boots of a character named Drew. Instead of being indigenous to the realm though, this non-customizable protagonist would have curiously hailed from the modern world. Finding himself within the non-linear landscape, Drew would have quickly bonded with a dragon called Thuban, before setting off on a journey of discovery. Between this heady mix of concepts, and the promise that the two heroes would have shared a symbiotic relationship gameplay-wise, it's easy to see why so many people are disappointed that Scalebound never became a playable reality. After Scalebound's global unveiling at E3 2014 via a cinematic trailer, several other follow-up appearances occurred over the course of several years. At 2015's E3 presentation, Platinum Games and Microsoft announced that, despite featuring a narrative seemingly designed to be a single-player experience, Scalebound would come with a 4-player cooperative option as well. Tentatively, a 2016 release window for the game was also set around this time, before it was publicly pushed back into 2017 towards the end of the year. Only a few months after this announcement, Microsoft revealed that development on Scalebound had come to an end. At the time, very few details were presented to the public as to why the game was cancelled. Speaking during an interview in 2019, Platinum Games Atsushi Inaba ambiguously stated that both sides of the equation had failed during Scalebound's development. 1 year later, Kamiya mentioned specifically during a follow-up interview that the studio had lacked the experience to create a game with online-centric features. An inability to live up to player expectations, and the damage this did to the mental health of Platinum's employees, as well as issues working with Unreal Engine 4, were both cited as reasons for the cancellation. Considering how Scalebound has often been positioned as Platinum Games' dream game, and the unceremonious nature of its cancellation, it's not shocking at all that the idea of its resurrection has persisted over the last 5 years. At several points during that time period, representatives from the studio have candidly stated their desire to try again with the project. With Microsoft having ownership over the Scalebound IP, it looks as though the decision to bring back the game for the Xbox Series X and S is a decision that rests solely on its metaphorical shoulders. Scalebound, to some degree, is still there. Renewed work on it can be done behind closed doors, it can be brought up to Xbox Series X standards, utilize new innovations in tech to improve the core content already there, and then Spencer and Platinum Games can hold off on the announcement until the year of its release. If Scalebound comes back strong, then that's great for the Xbox Series X, for other exclusive games under Microsoft's umbrella, and more. Bringing back Scalebound would come with high expectations, of course. Microsoft and Platinum Games have a chance to redeem one of the biggest shortcomings of the Xbox One generation, and Microsoft, especially as it continuously tries to push into the Japanese market, Platinum Games and Xbox Series X fans have nothing to lose by pushing the project forward. It just has to deliver on the original promise, and while that's easier said than done, the rewards far outweigh the risks. Platinum Games also said that they open to be acquired. It's highly unlikely, or maybe possible that Microsoft could acquire them. It is very hard because they are a Japanese studio, but the most likely company that will buy them is Square Enix. Square Enix own the Nier IP and Babylon's Fall is published by them, they have a good relationship, so that could be possible deal done. As far as for Scalebound, its revival is in the hands of Xbox. Speaking of acquisitions, in a recent conference call, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot addresses the company's continued independence, but not closing the door on being acquired. In terms of Ubisoft, CEO Yves Guillemot and CFO Frederic Duguet recently held a conference call with investors, reporting on sales, taking questions, and laying out release windows for games currently in development like Skull and Bones, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. However, Guillemot was asked specifically about the recent rise in acquisitions around the industry and what Ubisoft's perspective would be. Surprisingly, Guillemot seemed fairly open to it, though he did confirm that Ubisoft plans to remain an independent company thanks in large part to its financial scale, as well as its large portfolio of IPs. However, any offer made to acquire Ubisoft would be reviewed by the board of directors instead of being outright rejected. When asked why the company hasn't yet seen any offers to be purchased, Duguet and Guillemot declined to comment, simply reiterating the company's high-value assets and scale to create very meaningful value in the future. What's interesting about this admission is that Ubisoft now appears open to being acquired, something the company was vehemently against just a few years ago. A multi-year saga between Ubisoft and Vivendi took place back in 2016, raising hostilities between the two companies regarding being acquired. Vivendi initially wanted a bigger presence in the gaming industry, so it began purchasing more and more stock of the Ubisoft. Fearing a hostile takeover, Ubisoft began rebuying shares to keep Vivendi from becoming majority owner and initiating a takeover bid. Ultimately, Vivendi backed off, selling off its shares and leaving Ubisoft to remain independent. Ubisoft is constantly developing new video game projects, with a number of works already confirmed to be on the way. Some of these games have been announced for quite some time with seemingly no release date in sight, like pirate game Skull and Bones, but the latest information suggests that the long-awaited game will release at some point between April 2022 and April 2023. This is according to a recent conference call, where Ubisoft has confirmed that it plans on releasing Skull and Bones in the April 2022 to April 2023 window, along with Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope. There are more exciting games that Ubisoft plans to release in that timeframe as well, though specifics as to what exactly those other games are have not been revealed. Skull and Bones development has reportedly been quite rocky behind the scenes, with the game lacking focus and undergoing numerous changes during the development process. However, if Ubisoft truly believes that Skull and Bones will be out by April 2023, then it seems like the game may finally be on track. If so, fans should expect to see it again within the next year, perhaps as early as Ubisoft's E3 2022 press conference, though that's just speculation at this time. As for Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope, both those games were previously announced for 2022 releases, so fans should expect them by the end of the year, barring any delays. Skull and Bones could very well launch in 2022 as well, but it may be more likely to see it drop in 2023. Fans will just have to wait for more clarification on that front. In the meantime, there are other Ubisoft projects in the works that could very well release within that timeframe as well. There are multiple Assassin's Creed titles in development, and since the last AC game came out in 2020, it would make sense to see a new entry this year. There's also Beyond Good and Evil 2, though with it not named by Ubisoft, fans shouldn't hold their breath about seeing it anytime soon. Regardless, there should be plenty of new Ubisoft games for fans to look forward to in the year ahead. It's been a bit too late, but let's cover this small news. Starting Tuesday, February 1st, PlayStation Now subscribers can check out Death Squared, Grand Theft Auto Vice City the Definitive Edition, Little Big Workshop, and Through the Darkest of Times. GTA Vice City the Definitive Edition is being pushed as the headlining new game, and it's also the only one with a confirmed removal date. PlayStation Now subscribers will have full access to GTA Vice City the Definitive Edition from February 1st until it's removed on Monday, May 2nd. Grand Theft Auto Vice City the Definitive Edition is just the latest Grand Theft Auto game to make its way to PlayStation Now. It was preceded by Grand Theft Auto 3 the Definitive Edition, which was added to PlayStation Now back in December of 2021. It's possible that Sony is going to go for the hat trick, and we'll see Grand Theft Auto San Andreas the Definitive Edition join PlayStation Now at some point down the line, though that remains to be seen. GTA Trilogy had a rough launch due to a variety of technical problems and complaints about the art style. However, Rockstar Games has released multiple updates for GTA Trilogy to bring it to a better state. Problems still persist, unfortunately, but the collection has definitely made serious progress since it first released, and so interested PS Now subscribers shouldn't be apprehensive about checking out Vice City. Besides Grand Theft Auto Vice City the Definitive Edition, PlayStation Now subscribers can also check out Death Squared, Little Big Workshop, Through the Darkest of Times, and the hundreds of other PlayStation Now games that are already available on the service. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then, from SMPV, it's goodbye.